It's a mini review! Blueprint was a 1983 release by CBS Electronics for the Atari 2600. A port of the Bally Midway arcade, Blueprint is a unique premise. Your girlfriend is being chased by Ollie Ogre, and it's your task to rescue her by finding all the parts of your machine in order, and using it to shoot Ollie. In Stage 1, Ollie hides some of the parts to your machine in the houses. You have to collect them in order and place them on your cannon down below. If you enter a house that doesn't have a part, you'll retrieve a bomb. You'll have to dispose of bombs in the pit at the bottom right before they explode. Once you've assembled everything, press the start button in the bottom left to move to Stage 2. Here you have to shoot Ollie. Press up to adjust your shot speed at the top right, move left and right to position yourself, and press the button to shoot. The lower your power, the slower and more difficult your shot will be, but you'll get more points. Hitting Ollie before he catches your girlfriend will advance you to the next level, where you can go through the steps all over again. Blueprint is unique, and once you figure it out, pretty fun, albeit a bit clunky at times. 6 out of 10. Mini review. Buck Rogers' Planet of Zoom was a 1983 release by Sega for the Atari 2600. Buck Rogers is a port of the arcade 3D shooter of the same name. In this version, there are 2 stages. In the first, you have to pilot your ship through a series of gates as if you're on a slalom course. Through this course, you'll have to dodge and destroy aliens in your way. In the second stage, formations of ships will attack you. Once again, dodge and destroy to survive. From here, continue that cycle as it gets more and more difficult to reach a high score. This is another one of those games that suffers from its omissions from the original. 6 out of 10. It's another mini review. GORF was a 1982 release by CBS Electronics for the Atari 2600. A port of the Midway arcade game, GORF is a mashup of a variety of shooters spanning over 5 levels, although this version only has 4 of them. The first level is Astro Battles, a Space Invaders level. There's supposed to be a shield in this stage here, but it's missing. Second is Laser Attack, which pits you against a small group of dive-bombing aliens accompanied by one that fires a massive laser at you. There's supposed to be 2 groups in this stage, but it's cut down here. The third stage included is Space Warp, where alien ships spin out of a vortex in the center of the screen and shoot at you. Last but not least is the flagship. Missing is the shield and the ability to shoot the ship apart, so here you just have to line up your shot to hit the gap. Once the flagship is destroyed, you loop back to the first stage again. GORF on the 2600 is a pale shadow of its source material, and pretty disappointing. 5 out of 10. I Want My Mini Review. I Want My Mommy was a 1983 release by ZMAG for the Atari 2600. A climbing game in the same vein of Donkey Kong, in I Want My Mommy you play as a teddy bear trying to get to the top of 2 stages. You can't jump, so in order to ascend, you need to move to nodes on each platform and press a button to activate beams that you can then climb up and down. On the platforms, there are monsters that move back and forth trying to stop you. You'll have to dodge them, but from time to time, a flying pill will fly by, and if you can touch it, you'll have a brief moment where you can knock them out. In the first stage, you're trying to reach an apple. In the second stage, you have to get to Mommy. After that, the difficulty increases and you start over again. I Want My Mommy is simple, but actually really fun and challenging as you progress. 7 out of 10. Mini review. Miner 2049er was a 1983 release by Tiger Vision for the Atari 2600. A port of the computer game by Big 5 Software, the goal of Miner 2049er is to walk on every platform in the level while making sure not to fall and avoiding or killing the enemies roaming the mine. Levels all contain various obstacles that will make your task more difficult, including slides that, if you hit them, will take you to lower levels, forcing you to climb back up to the top. At least this is a safe way to drop. If you miss a jump from too high up, you'll fall to your death. The creatures in the mine can be defeated by grabbing one of the items floating near them. Touching the item will make the enemies flash for a short period, and in this state, walking into them will kill them. While the original had 10 mines to play, this version only has 3 screens. Although there's a Volume 2 that was released later in the year that had 3 more levels. Miner 2049er was an incredibly influential game in its time, and very popular, but this is a pretty mediocre port. 5 out of 10. Mini Review! Quick Step was a 1983 release by Imagic for the Atari 2600. A very unique game for 1 or 2 players, a kangaroo and a squirrel compete to change a scrolling series of trampolines to their own color for points. Bounce around changing colors of the trampolines, but be careful not to fall off the bottom of the screen. If you do, you'll be temporarily absent from the playfield, meaning your opponent can gather points without you. There are a few special mats that can make things more interesting. Each player has a number of tricky traps that they can deploy. Press the button when you're on a trampoline to make it disappear when you jump off of it. Jumping on a gold mat will give you extra tricky traps. Magic mats, which are white, make your character glow. In this state, if you land on the same space as your opponent, they will freeze for a short time, allowing you to collect more points and maybe even make them fall off the screen. After a set amount of trampolines, the round ends and the player with the most points wins. Quick Step is full of frantic gameplay and is a one-of-a-kind experience among more mainstream titles. 8 out of 10. Mini Review! Rampage was a 1989 release by Activision for the Atari 2600. A port of the popular arcade game by Bally Midway, in Rampage you play as a monster rampaging through cities trying to destroy property and cause havoc in general. Press the button to punch and grab, use the joystick to move and guide your punches. Rampage on the 2600 is surprisingly playable. It includes all the elements you would expect. You can still punch helicopters, buildings, and cars, as well as eat people. Unlike the NES port, you can even play as all three characters. This may not be the best version of Rampage out there, but if all you had in '89 was a 2600, this was a solid version that you could have a lot of fun with. 6 out of 10. It's a mini review! Skeet Shoot was a 1981 release by Apollo for the Atari 2600. Programmed by Ed Salvo in his home, and then purchased and released by the newly formed Apollo, in Skeet Shoot you play as a skeet shooter shooting clay pigeons. Press the button to launch the pigeon, aim with the joystick, and fire by pressing the button again. Make sure you fire quick though, as there's a very short window to hit your target. The difficulty is compounded by the fact that your shooter appears in a different location for each shot. A big drawback is that your gun has fixed shooting angles, and sometimes it's actually impossible to hit the target. You can play in 1 or 2 player mode, and a game consists of 10 shots. Hit as many as you can, scoring a point each to get your best score. Skeet Shoot doesn't suck, but it isn't good either. 3 out of 10. Mini Review! Solar Fox was a 1983 release by CBS Electronics for the Atari 2600. A port of the 1981 arcade game, Solar Fox pits you as a ship collecting cells inside of a matrix, where on the edges there are sentinels flinging fireballs through the playfield. Your ship moves on its own, and it's your job to steer it to collect all of the squares by using the joystick. Pressing the button speeds you up or slows you down, depending on whether you have your difficulty switch set to A or B. Fast speed is great for grabbing a bunch of cells quickly, but it can be harder to avoid the fireballs. There are also challenge levels where if you beat them quick enough, a letter will flash on the screen. Discover all the letters to reveal the mystery word, Helios. Solar Fox is a really simple idea, executed perfectly. So much fun. 10 out of 10. Mini Review! Strategy X was a 1983 release by Konami for the Atari 2600. A simple concept, in Strategy X you play as a tank traveling up in a forced scrolling environment trying to get to the top of a series of levels. Trying to stop you are walls and turrets that if you collide with them, they'll destroy you. Turrets will shoot at you as well. In later levels, there are planes that attack you also. Thankfully, you can shoot back, destroying enemies and walls. You also have to watch your fuel, as if it runs out, you die. You can pick up fuel tanks along the way to replenish your supply. Driving off-road will drain your fuel faster. At the end of each level, drive into the building to get to the next stage. Strategy X is a fun game that could use a bit more polish, but is definitely worth playing. 6 out of 10. Mini Review! Tapper was a 1984 release by Sega for the Atari 2600. A port of the popular arcade game, in Tapper you play as a bartender serving 4 counters of unruly patrons. Using the joystick, move from counter to counter, slinging drinks by pressing the button. Some patrons will be satisfied with 1 drink, but others require 2 or more before they'll leave your establishment. These extra thirsty customers will slide their empty glasses back to you. If you don't catch them, they'll smash in the ground and you'll lose a life. Other ways to die include sliding a drink down an empty counter where it falls and breaks, and letting a patron get to your end of the counter, where they will throw you out of the bar for not serving them. For every wave you clear, a trio of can-can dancers celebrate your victory. Tapper is a fantastic port. It looks and plays great, and is loads of fun. 9 out of 10. Mini Review! Task Force was a 1988 release by Froggo for the Atari 2600. A clone of SpectraVision's Gangster Alley, Task Force pits you against a slew of enemies popping out of windows trying to shoot you. Your goal is to move your aim from target to target, shooting them before they shoot you. Every once in a while, a man with a grenade will appear on the roof. Make sure to get him too. You can't just rapid fire though. You'll have to be accurate as you have limited ammo for each stage, and sometimes hostages appear in a window. Shooting them loses you points. Just keep firing away until they finally shoot you enough times to end your game. Task Force has solid gameplay, but I've never liked shooting games that use regular controllers. If there was a light gun for the 2600, I'd be all over this and it would get a higher score. 6 out of 10. Mini review. Thunderground was a 1983 release by Sega for the Atari 2600. Kind of a mashup of Dig Dug and Combat, in Thunderground, your goal is to destroy 6 nuclear silos at the top of the screen, while fighting and evading enemy tanks. Do this within the level time limit to advance. As you progress through levels, tanks become able to dig their own tunnels and become more persistent in their pursuit of you. Also, you'll have levels where the silos at the top have to be destroyed in a certain order. The concept and execution here is super simple, but cleanly done, and there's a certain addictive quality to it. Solid game for a high-score competition between friends, or just to have a few rounds of fun. 7 out of 10. Mini review. Tunnel Runner was a 1983 release by CBS Electronics for the Atari 2600. Tunnel Runner is a 3D maze game where your goal is to collect a key and then find the exit. Simple enough, but there will be a few obstacles in your way to prevent you from completing your task. First is the Zots, creatures that roam the maze and sometimes chase you. Touch them and you're dead. Second is the environment itself. With the 2600 being as primitive as it is, the 3D environment doesn't have smooth animations, which can be very disorientating. This actually adds to the tension as you try to escape. Pressing the button on your joystick gives you a much needed map to try to complete each level. Add a bunch of different door types that can teleport you or give you extra points, and some levels have invisible walls, and you have a game that offers a real challenge as you progress. I like this one, 7 out of 10.